Everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Coming back from Thanksgiving. Hope everybody got some good rest and ate lots of food and had some great fellowship with their families. We're going to go ahead and get started today. We're talking about the importance of year-round UV protection, especially since we're in the repair season. We're trying to repair all the sun damage we did to our skin over the summer. Now it's even more important to make sure that we're protecting our skin. So we have with us today Dr. James Beckman. He's the founder and CEO of Theraderm. He is also a biochemist. He's a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, board certified. So he brings to us a lot of great knowledge. He was recently appointed as an associate professor for the School of Dermatology at the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences. So that's yet another thing to add to his repertoire of knowledge that he brings to you. Then we have Darla Smith. She is our general manager, so she runs the day-to-day operations of Theraderm. She is also an account executive, so she handles a territory of wholesale accounts. She handles all of our esthetician accounts, and then she also handles the UK. So she's got her plate full, and she brings to the table, because she does talk to skincare professionals on a day-to-day basis, via email or on the phone or via text. She hears the real life situations, things that are going on, in the real world. And so she brings to us, just knowledge she gains from speaking with you guys. So let's go ahead and move along, and I will get those slides pulled up and we'll just go from there. All right, this is awkward. It takes a minute.
Well, while we're waiting on her to get the slides, I was just going to let everyone know that we've decided not to have any more Zooms this month with everybody having so much going on with the holidays. And we are kind of working short shifts the last 2 weeks of the month. So this will be our last Zoom for December, and we will be getting back with everybody before January to get it started. And we've got a lot of things that we're working on that we're coming out with too, so that we will keep you posted on that. But always remember that if you have any questions or you have any patients that you have questions about, feel free to either send the pictures of the patient and what they're doing, what products they're using, what problems they're having, and you can send those either to Dr. Beckman or myself, and he will get back with you. And we would also love to just do another Zoom on different problems that you have in your office. So just kind of a reminder of that, and we will let you know that when we will start back in January, but we just felt like it was probably pushing everybody so much with the holidays and everybody's open houses and stuff, trying to get this going. So we're just going to kind of take a break after today and then get back in January. So I think we've got the slides ready, and we will start talking about sunscreen.
Very good. Well, sunlight is a combination of different wavelengths that all have different things. We've all heard about infrared and black light and those sort of things. Those sun rays, or those wavelengths, are all within the sun's full spectrum. But when we talk about the visible rays, they really aren't harmful to most. Anyway, the visible light rays don't cause skin damage. The rays that we can't see, that are just below the wavelength of visible light, are the UVA, UVB, and UVC rays. UVC really doesn't have enough energy to penetrate clouds and doesn't get down to the Earth's surface, so we don't have to worry about that. It would be very damaging if it did get to the Earth's surface. but because of the wavelength itself and the mechanics, the optics, if you will, just doesn't get here. So UVB and UVA are the two wavelength ranges that we're concerned with. And of course, UV stands for ultraviolet, and it's ultraviolet light that causes 80% of our aging changes in skin. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is sunlight's the enemy and how do we protect from the enemy. And why should we use year-round sun protection? Well, the sun is out there even when we have clouds. We know in the summertime, the sun is closer to our skin here in the United States because of the orbital position of the sun as compared to the wintertime. It's colder in the winter because the sun is farther away from where we are in the United States. In South America and in Australia, their winter months are actually their summertime months. In other words, when it's wintertime here, it's not wintertime there. So why do we need it year round? Well, partly because the UV rays are coming from the sun every day in incremental small doses that are cumulative, and that causes 80% of the aging appearance in our skin. So if we use sun protection, traditional, like 30 years ago, your parents probably told you to put a sunscreen on if you're going to the beach, and that was good. Prevented sunburn. That's the only sun protection, copper tone and those products only protected from UVB, which was the burning type rays from the sun. But subsequently, we know that UVA gets down into the skin and causes damage to the dermis, which is the collagen and elastic fiber in the skin. Causes a number of things that we interpret visibly as the aging appearance to skin. Next. Now, when do we use sunscreen? Well, when the sun's out. Makes sense. Even in the wintertime, we have sun exposure. As a matter of fact, I can remember from personal experience going skiing in the mountains in Colorado, you know, at 5,000 or 6,000 feet altitude, you're a lot closer to the sun than we are here in Arkansas and most of the southern states. But the snow surface reflects sun exposure just like a mirror would. So skiers would get a horrible burn if they didn't use sunscreen or goggles that block their eyes. You'd see folks in the ski shop that had horrible sunburns, and certainly those persons, ski bunnies, I call them, guys and gals that lived out there that skied every day of the winter months, looked about 10 years older than their actual age just because they didn't use sun protection. So yeah, even in wintertime, it's good to use a sunscreen. And certainly after there's any kind of injury to skin, like with a facial treatment of a true dermabrasion or phototherapy treatments, any of the treatments that we do for wrinkles into the face are going to allow the skin to be more easily harmed. So certainly after those treatments that estheticians or aesthetic physicians do, advise your patients to use a good broad spectrum sunscreen. And then obviously during direct outdoor sun exposure, whether you're playing golf or tennis or at the beach or just working outside in the yard, you should have sunscreen on.
Dr. Beckman, what about a lot of the ladies say they don't leave the house. So why should they put sunscreen on while they're in the house? What's your comments about that?
Well, unless they're staying in a dark closet, they're still getting some light coming through the window. And it's true that the UVB, the burning type rays, don't penetrate through glass. So if you, let's say you had a home office that you were sitting at with a window that's letting the sun come in so you can be refreshed and happy and that sort of thing, you're still getting the UVA rays through that glass window, even though you don't get a sunburn from the UVB rays. So another reason is oftentimes during the day, we'll think of something we need to do outside or run an errand or leave the house, even though we're not going to work or something like that. And if you have a habit of putting your sunscreen on every morning, it's going to be there whether you think about it or not, if you run to the store to pick up more coffee or whatever. So that would be my answer to that. You're not going to get a sunburn through the window, but you're going to get older that day from just the UVA ray damage.
Should they, if they, basically stay inside a lot, should they still reapply the sunscreen throughout the day, or just putting it on that morning, should that be sufficient?
Well, I think probably, unless you're in direct sunlight, in other words, you're getting reflected light from outside, most of us don't have the actual round ball of sun shining right in our face through the window. So I think putting the sunscreen on in the morning is certainly a good first step and probably adequate for most people.
Okay, thank you.
Now, how much sunscreen should we use and how often? And that kind of relates to what you were talking about a while ago. Most people only put 25 to 50% of the recommended amount of sunscreen on their face. And there are two reasons for that. One, most sunscreens are in an oil base. So we put enough on to give us full protection from the sun. It's going to be, greasy is not a good word, but it's an unusual surface coating on our skin. So it's a little bit uncomfortable physically just from the oiliness of most of the inexpensive sunscreens. And it's kind of expensive for the better sunscreens that don't have that oily thing. So we're trying to be prudent spenders, so we don't want to spend $2 a day on sunscreen. So the bottom line is most people that do use sunscreen on a daily basis, or when they do get out in the sun, use less than the recommended amount to really control the sun damage that's there. And then it needs to be applied to all of the exposed skin. Most people don't think about putting sunscreen on the backs of their hands, for instance. They go outside and working in the garden, pulling weeds or mowing grass or doing whatever. You're getting sun on your hands if you're not wearing gloves. And certainly the neck and chest area with open collared shirts get sunlight there. And then obviously the face gets sun, and most people put sunscreen on the face, but don't forget the tops of your ears. We see a lot of skin cancers in elderly men just on the tops of the ears because they never had protecting that particular area, even if they use sunscreens. And certainly farmers and those that work outdoors need to protect the face, the chest, and hands and ears, and cover all that exposed area. It takes about an ounce, and an ounce is a pretty good amount of something. But that's for covering all those body areas that we talked about. That's not just for your face. And don't forget the top of your head. If you're like me and your hair gets a little bit thinner, you get some spots that get direct sunlight from above. And yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable to mix sunscreen with your hair. If you got long long, pretty hair like you ladies, but if you've got a thin spot and you're going to be out fishing all day or on the beach or playing golf or something without a hat, put sunscreen on the thin spots. And always put it on before you go outside, because it takes a little while for it to absorb to the skin surface and evenly distribute. And then most people say every 2 hours. Certainly if you've been outside sweating or swimming or things of that sort, the sunscreen itself gets wiped off when your face sweats and you wipe with a rag or back of your hand across your face. You're taking some of that sunscreen off. So every 2 hours is probably a good rule if you're going to be outside all day.
The other thing that women are wondering is a lot of times their makeup has sunscreen in it. But they should use sunscreen, and even if their makeup has a sunscreen in it, shouldn't they?
Well, it depends on the sunscreen, and it depends on the makeup. Now, a really good mineral powder makeup will have zinc oxide that blocks the UVB rays or the UVA rays, and titanium dioxide is, zinc and titanium are not the same. If it contains both titanium and zinc oxide, you're getting the full spectrum control from that. So, and if you're doing that, that's probably okay. They certainly have a preference for which one of the mineral powder makeups. I preferentially have used Iredale mineral makeup for my patients post-operative and that sort of thing. But the color of the makeup with mineral powder is matched to the skin tone, the natural skin tone of that patient. And if, like I say, if it has zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, putting that powder on gives really good protection throughout the day. The other thing that's important about that is you don't need to reapply mineral powder makeup every 2 hours, because it's not being diluted or wiped away with sweat and things of that sort. Obviously, if you're going in swimming, you're going to wash some off, so it's important to reapply any of the sunscreen choices, if you will, from that. The UVA rays are the ones that cause the laxity of skin, the thinness of skin, as well as the loss of elasticity, causes wrinkles. And most of us don't like wrinkles, although the oldest guy in the Indian tribe was usually the wisest, or thought of as the wisest. It ain't necessarily true if he's got skin cancer. So UVA is the one that causes those damages to the wrinkles and sagging. UVB is the one that causes the epidermal cancer changes. The UVA goes right through glass, but the UVB is blocked by airplane windows, for instance, or glass. You might notice that next time you fly on an airplane, all of the pilots have sunglasses. And the reason for those sunglasses, there's special material glass that catch those UVA rays that are coming through the cockpit windows of that airplane. Otherwise, they're going to be at 30,000 feet. They're getting about 10 times the amount of sun exposure to their skin as the person that's loading the bags on the ground at the airport. So pilots, as well as sailors, sailors are out on the ocean, and the water reflects just like a mirror. So they're getting a double dose of sun exposure in those two professional or even vacation, I won't say occupational, but environmental activities. That's flying on airplanes or being on the ocean, deep sea fishing, or just on a cruise. So those are are places out on the ocean or on vacation cruises really require frequent repeated applications of sunscreens. Obviously, most cruises are going to be in the Caribbean or sunny areas rather than Antarctic or Arctic Ocean places. So take sunscreen when you go on vacations. And what's the difference between a chemical and a physical sunscreen? We talked a little bit about the mineral powder makeup. That would be a physical sunscreen. And by physical, what we're referring to, it's the property of the material, the sun reflective material in mineral powder. It's a physical component. It's like a little mirror, and it actually reflects the ray. Some rays can get through the particles, so it's important to have a good thick layer of the mineral powder on. So it's therefore important to have that color of your mineral powder really well matched to your skin tone. And most mineral powder makeups do have multiple choices of the tone or the color of that. When we say mineral powder, basically what that is ground up rock. If you took different colored rocks and ground them up, you'd get different colored powders, and you could mix those powders to get a match for most skin tones. So the physical sunscreens or the mineral sunscreens, they work like a shield. They actually reflect. And as I mentioned earlier, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are the two actual chemical minerals in those sunscreens. And those sunscreens usually are best for sensitive skin because they don't have a chemistry interaction like most of the other ingredients in the chemical sunscreens. Now, chemical sunscreens act in a different way than the physical or mineral sunscreens, in that a chemical sunscreen is a particle. It's multiple complex arrangements of atoms into a mineral itself, into a chemical itself, and that chemical absorbs the energy coming in with the sunlight, or as the sun energy itself. And when they absorb that sun energy, that chemical is actually damaged. It's like if you had a nice fine walnut table and you strike it with a hammer, you're going to put a dent in it. And what happens with the chemical sunscreens, they absorb the energy and it either breaks that particle apart or changes its chemical components that actually give off a secondary form of energy that's just as harmful as the original energy that came in. So even when they're working effectively, they're not working as effectively as you need to protect your skin. There's a number of active ingredients that are used, and I think we can see them on the screen there, the oxybenzones and avabenzones, and then the octosalates and homosalates and octinoxates are in two different categories. But both of those are relatively easy to formulate into sunscreens that you can rub into skin, and you don't get a white residue. The white residue from the old ads we used to see for sunscreens contains zinc oxide. That's what your lifeguard at the swimming pool 30 years ago would have on his nose that made it look white. It was larger particles of zinc oxide. Now the physical sunscreen particles are able to be much smaller in diameter, as well as the active ingredients can be formulated into very small particles that don't reflect a white visible reflected light. but they're different in how they work. Now, which is better, high or low SPF? I think the rule is pretty well proven that if you use a good broad spectrum sunscreen, and by broad spectrum, one that blocks UVA and UVB and has an SPF value rating, and there's a FDA monograph that tells you how you can, what you have to make a claim for, say, a SPF 30 or 20 or whatever. But an SPF 30 blocks nearly all of the sunscreen that's going to cause damage. There are certain conditions that predispose, whether they're genetic or diseases, that predispose a person to more easily damaged skin from sun. And they probably should use a 60 or higher sunscreen. And those almost always will be prescribed by their doctor, if you will. So a good SPF of 30 blocks most of the sun that most of us are going to get, but there's not one available, period, that blocks 100% of the sun rays. So mid-range, certainly an SPF of 10 is available, but it's not going to be very good protection. An SPF 30 is going to be as good as most people will need in their daily thing. And another thing that we think about, regardless of whether you're using a 30 or a 60 or a 20 or a 90 SPF value, it only lasts the amount of time as a low sunscreen number would. So the high SPF doesn't let you get by without reapplication during the day sometime. And as we talked about, when you're outdoors, certainly on cloudy days, reapply your sunscreen every 2 hours or so. In other words, carry it in your purse or in your knapsack or in your car or wherever you're going to be when you're outside. Take it to the beach. Use it up. I mean, it doesn't expire, but it doesn't do any good if it's still in the tube when you get back home. That leads us in, do they lose their strength? They really don't lose their strength, but all drugs, sunscreens are over-the-counter drugs. Prescription drugs are over-the-counter drugs. All are mandated to have an expiration date by the FDA, and that has to do with physical separations and other things that could happen to them. So use your sunscreen up. If you've got a tube that's lasted 3 years, you hadn't used it often enough. So enough for that, whether it loses its strength or not. And if the expiration date is passed, buy another tube, throw that one away, or another bottle if it's a liquid, or more powder if it's powder. And if it doesn't have an expiration date, whenever you buy your sunscreen, write it on there. But I can pretty much guarantee that your container is going to have an expiration date. It may be coded, stamped into the plastic if it's a plastic tube, thing like that. And obviously, if your sunscreen comes out of the tube and doesn't have the right color, consistency, things of that sort, don't use it. It's probably not harmful in itself, but it's probably not going to protect your skin. There's an awful lot more we could talk about in terms of sunscreens, but folks may have some questions, Darla. Darla's sound's not on.
Okay, I was just talking to myself.
You do that a lot.
Kind of touched on this. She was wanting to know the difference between the mineral SPF and the standard SPF. And I know you kind of had a slide on that, so I wasn't sure if there was a little more information you could give her or not.
Well, let me just talk about SPF, and I think that will answer the question.
Okay.
SPF stands for sun protection factor, and each person, like regardless of age or condition or other things, each person has a pretty much fixed amount of time that their skin will allow them to stay in direct sunlight at noon before they see the first sign of erythema or redness. And that's called the minimal erythema dose. And let's say my MED is about 12 minutes. So without any sunscreen, sun protection on, I go stand in the bright sunlight at noon, I'm going to have a pink glow to my skin by 12 minutes. If I could use a sunscreen that let me stay out there 10 times as long, that would be 120 minutes. Guess what? That's about 2 hours. And that's about when we ought to reapply new sunscreen. So the SPF value has to do with the multiples of the MED, the multiples of time you could stay outside without a sunscreen and still be protected from a burn. Mineral and the chemical sunscreens, either one, SPF means the same thing. I don't know if that answers or confused the question that was asked.
I think that helped her. Another question is, a lot of times people are doing procedures on acne patients, and we always, talk about that everyone needs to have sunscreen on after a procedure. I know that some acne patients worry about it being too much or clogging their pores. What recommendations, I know ours is non-clogging, but what could you kind of relate to them to make the patient feel a little better about putting sunscreen on?
Well, the first thing I would say is that sunlight generates, causes the skin to generate more skin sebaceous material. So obviously, if you're going to be in the sun and you got acne, you don't want to get more sebaceous material. It makes your acne worse. So you got to use a sun protection. You need it for an additional reason than skin cancer or the aging process. That taken into consideration, our particular platinum sunscreen is as minimal, the minimal amount of oil that you can have. And so it's usually tolerated by an oily prone or an acne prone skin. I think if I had a bad acne condition, and certainly if I were getting treatments for that acne with retin-A or retinoids or chemical peels or other things, you need extra protection for a number of different reasons. And a mineral powder makeup is easy to use without clogging pores. It easily comes off with certainly our cleansing wash.
Okay. That seems like everything was covered. I'm not seeing any other questions. Everybody seems to have gotten their questions answered and really enjoyed it. I just kind of want to remind everybody, in case you were a little late, we are not going to be having any more Zooms this month. We're putting them on hold just because of the holidays and everybody's so busy. That we will get back in touch with you come January, but we are be watching for some information. We are adding some things and doing some different, hopefully some things that will help grow your business. So be watching for the updates on that. Another reminder, if you have patients that you have questions about that come in that you're not really sure how to treat them, if you take a picture, and Dr. B likes to know exactly what they've been doing, what products they've been using, what's going on, and take a picture and send to him or either myself, and he would be glad to, help answer and try to help you with a solution for their problems. Or if you just have a question, kind of a general question, like if you think of something about sunscreen later on, feel free to email him or myself, and we will get that answered for you. And I think that's all I have for the day.
Merry Christmas.
Yes, Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy New Year. And we'll also be letting you know the in the next few weeks the hours that we will be closed for Christmas and New Year's too. So have a great day, everyone, and we will talk to you in the new year.